So hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. We will wait 2 more minutes for more attendees to join us, and we will start sharp 3 minutes after 1 o'clock Germany time. So thank you very much for joining and for your patience, and we will start very, very soon. It seems like we have 1 more minute for more attendees to join us today in our TRUSTS webinar. So let's wait 1 more minute and then we will start 3 minutes past 1. So according to my watch, we are already 3 minutes past 1 in Germany time. So thank you very much for joining us today. We actually have organized many webinars in TRUSTS that cover various angles of our project. And today we focus on another topic, which is very crucial and important when it comes to the uptake of data market technologies and data sharing in the European Union and beyond. So the topic of today's webinar is the federation of data markets and the importance of data sharing in the European Union. As you are attendees, we cannot hear you. Only the panelists can speak. Thus, please make sure to add your questions in the chat. And at the end of the webinar, we have a Q&A session where we can answer all your questions. So I would like to welcome my exceptional TRUSTS colleagues that are with me today and will be also panelists on this webinar. So my name is Alexandra Garagiani, and I'm the TRUSTS coordinator as well as work package leader. I have with me my exceptional colleague, Mr. Michael Fribus, who is project manager in TRUSTS and will be supporting with the webinar, with the Q&A that will take place afterwards, and also with your questions in the chat. Moreover, we have with us today Mark, who is an expert in the business angles of data markets and data platforms. Mark is working at the Delft University of Technology and will be our first panelist today. Also, we have with us Jana Avusti from EPOS, who is an expert in R&D, project management of European projects, and work package leader in the use cases of TRUSTS. Moreover, we have Yanis with us, who is director at Nova, and he's the key expert when it comes to the technologies that we work upon, and more specifically, their implementation and uptake in the telecom sector. We have with us Dr. Andreas Kugler, who is Deputy Head of Data Security Department at the NO Center and as well as at TU Graz. And Andreas is also expert when it comes to the uptake and implementation of data privacy solutions. Last but not least, we have with us our legal and ethics expert, Lorenzo Gugliotta from the University of Louvain, who is the researcher in ICT law and will be presenting the legal and ethical angles that are relevant to our project. So a warm welcome from my side to all these exceptional panelists, and thank you for being with us today. Let's see our agenda for today. So we will start with a brief introduction of the AIDS 2020 TRUSTS project, mainly to see a bit the objectives and overview of the project and what we are working on. Then our next topics are listed here. For example, we will have a discussion about business model and how we can federate them. We will focus afterwards on the TRUSTS use cases and mainly focus on the business angles of them. Moreover, we will discuss how emerging technologies enable trustworthy data sharing. And last but not least, we will focus on the legal and ethical frameworks and principles that are relevant to data valorization. Towards the conclusion of our webinar today, we will have our Q&A session where our experts will answer your questions and give further insights into our project. So let's start to discuss what is TRUSTS. So TRUSTS stands for Trusted Secure Data Sharing Space. And now we have proudly entered the last and final year of our project. So mainly in TRUSTS, we are working to further support the uptake of data market technologies and enable the data economy to further flourish in Europe and beyond. And to achieve that, we have a vast range of objectives that cover various interrelated areas and disciplines. For example, our work in trust focuses on enabling and assuring trust when it comes to working with secure data platforms. For that, we are working a lot with privacy-related analytics. Moreover, we want to further improve data and ICT skills across Europe. And to achieve that, we bring into the mix in our consortium not only universities and research centers, but also SMEs that are working directly with customers and bringing technologies to the markets. We want to further enhance interoperability in trusts and bring together diverging technical as well as legal standards. And last but not least, we are thinking long term. So we want to enhance scalability of our solutions and also improve privacy and confidentiality. So this is our exceptional trust consortium that brings together 17 partners from 9 countries. We have experts in all related disciplines, and we bring together a unique mix of research and academic partners as well as industrial partners that have also very high domain expertise when it comes to the angles related to trusts. So we have identified various reasons why the further uptake of data market technologies is somehow impeded or not progressing as fast as it could. So one reason for that is mainly that there was a lack of trusted and secure platforms, and this minimizes the impact of the project and also the further use of platforms. Another important angle is the limited data sharing. So we know many platforms that work with open data, and they're further flourishing and growing. At the same time, it is really key that we work in a legal way, respecting GDPR, but we also work with industrial data as well as personal data, because this data is key when it comes to making informed business decisions and developing new insights about, for example, customer preferences that further will spur the growth of better and new revolutionary data products. And moreover, another factor why the growth of data spaces and data markets can be impeded nowadays is the fact that there are very diverging standards, not only technological standards, but also when it comes to the legal and ethical frameworks. So in Trusts, we are working in that direction, and we are trying to find solutions to tackle these very high-level challenges. So in that regard, our technological orientation is towards allowing the integration and adoption of future platforms. And our vision is that the Trust platform can act independently while also as a platform federator. A core pillar of our work is the legal and ethical research that we conduct during our project, because we want to ensure the successful uptake of our solutions and further investigate the legal and ethical aspects along the data value chain. What makes Trusts unique? So I would say, besides the very ambitious goals of Trusts, what is really unique about Trusts is that we further build upon the lessons learned of 2 very important national projects in Europe. So the first one is the Data Market Austria, and of course the German project that has become a company, International Data Spaces Association, or IDSA, which I'm sure you know very well or have heard about, and is now working and is further integrated and developed by Gaia X. So we're using this technological basis of this project, and we're working on the technical components as well as the business and stakeholder community building lessons learned, and we are accelerating in this way the uptake of our solutions. So it's about further building and not reinventing the wheel from the start. Our goal in TRUSTS is to further co-create a secure and trustworthy European data market for personal and industrial data. And to achieve that, we are working very closely with the data community in Europe and beyond, and we are engaging many stakeholders, either from the public or the private domain, to further test the functionalities of our platform. In that regard, GDPR is a core component of our project, and we want our European data marketplace to be GDPR compliant. And of course, when it comes to testing our technology and realizing its potential, we have our 3 business-oriented use cases. So in that regard, TRUSTS has very high and ambitious contributions in many domains, ranging from enabling technological trust to investigating and further building upon the technical and ethical frameworks. And in that sense, we want to establish the necessary foundation that will allow for greater interoperability as well as integration and adoption of future platforms. Our goal is to act independently, but also as a platform federator. In that sense, besides the core legal framework that is very important when it comes to ensuring sustainability and compliance, we are conducting research when it comes to developing sustainable business models and plans that take into account all the important and diverse angles for that regard. We really believe that business models are key when it comes to developing a sustainable and far-reaching data innovation environment. About our 3 use cases, I will just briefly mention that they're focused on the financial and telecom sector, and my colleagues later, Jana and Yanis, will showcase in more detail the use cases as well as their business angles. And of course, when it comes to the business model, we want to explore and research all the applicable solutions that exist while taking into account IP protection, data management, innovation, and we want to establish preconditions for successful business models and best practices. And more on that will come soon with our first presentation of today. So in terms of impact, TRUSTS has high, very ambitious goals when it comes to delivering impact. Besides the technological component, as you have already understood and heard, we focus a lot on the legal and ethical frameworks in GDPR. We want our solutions to be scalable and adaptable by other stakeholders as well. And we are further building on the angles that have to do with the business uptake of our solutions, namely when it comes to business model development and innovation. Having DMA and IDSA in our consortium, and DMA where we are further building upon, has been a very key solution for us, and it's also a prerequisite to include future data markets. Last but not least, we are engaging end users and stakeholders in our project, and we develop guidelines for all the successful uptake of technology, business, and ethical research. So that was from my side, a brief introduction about our project. And I would like to give the floor now to Mark, who is our business expert.
Yeah, thanks, Alexandra.
Thank you, Mark.
So, waiting for the screen sharing. Okay. Hope you can see my screen. So yeah, thanks, Alexander, for the introduction. What I will do in this presentation is go through very quickly about the need to federate these data marketplaces, but also the challenges in doing so. If we aim for a single market to trade data, that is a very high and ambitious vision. But to realize that, when we look at the reality today, we see an immensely fragmented landscape of data marketplaces with very, very diverse business models. So federating them is not that easy. But let's start with some basics. So what is data trading? And I always like to start with this slide. It shows a glass house of the horticulture industry. My country, the Netherlands, very famous for doing that, growing tulips, peppers, and whatever you can think about. This is also one of the most innovative industries in terms of Internet of Things and sensors, because following how the crops are growing, that can provide a huge competitive advantage for firms. Now, data sharing is very sensible to do here, to compare how your crops are growing to those of a competitor. But data trading goes an extra step, because that's exchanging the data, not just sharing it, but exchanging it against remuneration, so against the payment, and at a large scale. So not a one-off thing, but really on and on continuous selling and buying of data. Now, data marketplaces are a tool to make that possible. So the data marketplace is a platform where buyers of data and sellers of data can find each other, and perhaps some complementary service providers offer analytics or other types of services. So data marketplaces are an idea, a concept to facilitate data trading. Now, on the next slide, what we see here is a literature meta-analysis that my team has done, guided by Antargama Abbas, PhD student in TRUSTS. So this is a study that we did to compare in the literature, what are the themes that people are studying? So what are often being studied is architecture, that's very high here, 21, computational pricing, and here on the right side, pricing mechanisms. Now this makes sense, right? And it's important, and it's also what we do in TRUSTS, an architecture to enable data trading in a safe way, in a privacy-preserving way, in a secure way. And of course, pricing is essential. Without pricing, there's no market, there's no way to trade. So this is also very important. But this is not the full picture of the business model, of course. The business model is also about these smaller blocks, like the value proposition or what users want. It's about how to organize all of this, governance of the data to enable sovereignty, the data ecosystem. So the business model is much wider than these technical and financial issues. Yet, what people are studying, what scientists are studying today, is mainly those big blocks and not the business model as a whole. Now, one of the early things that we did in TRUSTS by master student Romy Bergman, who worked within TRUSTS, is look into different business models of existing data markets to get a feel of what is the business model in these markets. And what she found, she studied only actually 6 cases, but she already found a massive difference in terms of business models between those cases. So, for instance, some data marketplaces, they just exchange data on location or on the industry or on different industries. Some of them offer quality checks by the data marketplace owner itself, or no quality info at all, or just have users review the quality. Some of them offer anonymization, other ones encrypt the data. Some of them have standardized contracts, which is easy, of course, if you want to trade data on a large scale. And some of them only have negotiated per case contracts. So what you see here is that there is a massive diversity in terms of business models between those data marketplaces. And data marketplaces are also fragmented. So a lot of the existing data markets are specific for one country or even a city, a smart city. Often they are specific for an industry. So in the previous slide, there were only mobility and automotive data marketplaces. There's also industrial, Industry 4.0 data markets. And often they are also specific and tailored for a specific type of data, like IoT data with the horticulture firms, or personal data, or business-to-business data. And what is striking here is that in most markets where there are platforms, there's one winner that takes it all. There's one Uber, there's one Airbnb, or maybe two, Google and Apple in the smartphone industry. But at least today we see hundreds of data marketplaces, very specialized, many of them, also cross-industry. And this is challenging if you want to sell your data. You have to be on multiple data marketplaces at the same time. If you want to find data, how do you know which data marketplace to go to? That's difficult if it's very fragmented. And if all those data markets have different rules, different business rules and conditions, that means that multi-homing, as we call that is not for free. So using all these markets in parallel, if you want to sell or buy your data, that's challenging and costly. And contrast with this is the EU policy. If you look to EU policy, it wants a single market for data. It's very understandable. I think it's a very justifiable aim for a policy. And we see that in the European Data Strategy, we see it in the Data Governance Act and in the Data Act. And we also see initiatives like Gaia-X, which mainly focus on the technical side of federating data markets, making them interoperable, such that data from one data market can be used in another one. And that is important, that technical side. But as I told you, these data markets are also different in the business side. So just having the technical interoperability, that's not going to cut it to have interoperability between data markets. So to summarize the problem statement, and then I will come to what we do in TRUSTS, how we want to solve this massive problem. The problem statement is that the EU favors a single market for trading data, but today's data marketplaces are fragmented and they are so diverse that it's difficult to integrate them. And it's difficult to deal with all those different data markets if you want to sell your data or buy your data. So the question becomes how to integrate a myriad, a diversity of data platforms. How can we do that? This is one of the main missions that we have in the business model work in TRUSTS, how to integrate on a business level those data markets. Now, when we look to some literature on platforms, which is basically my background as a researcher, we see there's some work on platforms that build on top of each other, which leads to integration, like forking in Android. Platforms that nest within each other, so they become a service for another platform, like Facebook authentication is for other platforms. We sometimes see third parties that build a bridge. So the data buyer or the data seller in this case would create something to bridge two platforms. It could be. And we see work on the technical interoperability. So there are some basic intuitions from those literature, but it's not so easy to transfer that to a data market context. What do we see on data marketplaces and federation? We see work on linkaging between platforms. So the Gaia-X standard for interoperability between platforms. But what we are focusing especially in TRUST is the meta platforms. So federating different platforms, for instance, through a broker function. Maybe this is also what the data space could be. It's a federation. It's at least a way that different platforms within an industry can work together. So we think this is needed as a way forward to solve that immense fragmentation in the current landscape. We've also done some works in TRUST on what do actually data market platforms want this? Do they want to be federated? Do they want to become interoperable? So here we did a study on IoT platforms, and we found there's a range of factors and trade-offs to be made. Of course, the business outcome is important. Does it help my business if my platform becomes federated? But there's also the legal side or the legitimacy side. Is this complying with regulation? And there we see that there's a lot of uncertainty about regulation, which the colleagues will speak about later as well in this panel sessions. And that also hinders the federation. And the context matters, the context of the organization, but also the markets at large. Something that we're currently working on is defining a path from a data market to a federated data market. This is difficult to explain in just the minutes that I have here, but there could be different ways. We could start simple with just having a search engine to discover different data platforms. And then users just have to go to those data platforms to trade their data. But we could also go to the up right corner, really a one-stop shop. So there's one shop where you can sell and buy your data, and on behalf of you, they will go to those different data marketplaces and make it happen for you. There could be different roadmaps to realize this, and we're currently looking into the different business model roadmaps. Now, how does Trust contribute to solve this problem? What we've done in the very start of the project is to make a systematic overview of archetypical data marketplace business models. So we started out making a taxonomy of the different business models that exist. So we know that there is diversity and we know what diversity exists. And then archetypical data marketplaces. So what are the typical ones that need to be federated? We did the research, which I showed a few slides ago, about factors for data platform owners to decide about, do they want to federate or not? And we are currently working on an example business model, or perhaps business models, for data marketplace federation. And finally, a roadmap. So how do you come from a data marketplace, which is also the ambition of that Trust want to deliver, towards a federated platform? So huge ambitions to come from a data marketplace landscape that is immensely fragmented with very diverse business models to federation, whatever that may mean in business model terms. Challenging to do, but very much needed, because without some form of not just technical interoperability, but also business interoperability, without that, there will be no single market to trade data. Thank you. Back to Alexander.
Thank you very much, Mark, for this very insightful presentation. Fantastic insights shared, and I'm really looking forward to our Q&A session. So let's welcome our next speakers, Jana and Yanis, who will be elaborating on our Trust's use cases and their business angles.
Hello, everyone. Is my presentation on screen? Okay.
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you, Jana.
Okay. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Mark. My name is Jana. I'm on behalf of Ecos Technologies, one of the 17 partners of the Trust project. Today, with Ioannis Markopoulos on behalf of Nova, we will have a look on the an initial recap on the project goal, as well as a high-level use cases description. And then the progress so far, the quality validation framework of the use cases, the prototype validation goals, the key evaluation trial scenarios, the proposed business model architecture, and then final Q&A slot if you have the time. Okay, so the Trust project, the Horizon 2020 project Trust, the Trusted Secure Data Sharing Space, as we already mentioned, aims to develop a data sharing platform for secure, trustworthy, and GDPR compliant data exchanges. We define 3 business-oriented use cases within this project. The first one is the smart big data sharing and analytics for anti-money laundering use case. The second one is the agile marketing by correlation of anonymized banking and operators data. And the third one is the improved customer support services by data acquisition. The 3 use cases aim to demonstrate and recognize the added value of the Trust platform. That is to generate through the innovative applications built on multiple data sources. The use cases showcase the sharing, the trading, and the use of data, their services and application throughout the platform. They target corporate business data in the financial and telecommunications operator industries. Use case 1, as we said, is the smart big data sharing and analytics for anti-money laundering use case, which aims to demonstrate the capabilities of the Trust platform as a trusted, secure data sharing space for anti-money laundering purposes. Financial institutions, corporate audit departments, tax advisors, and many more need to perform anti-money laundering checks. This use case aims to improve the detection of financial crime and money laundering for the interested parties, of course, by combining data provided on the Trust platform to securely traded by the platform by means of big data analytics and existing anti-money laundering solutions. To support the compliance officers of the interested users or institutions is the main goal. So 3 applications were developed or enhanced, deployed in the Trust platform to support this use case by EBOS. 3 anti-money laundering solutions basically were deployed in the Trust platform for the evaluation and the validation of basically the functionalities of the platform for this use case. The second use case is the Agile marketing by correlation of anonymized banking and operators data, and aims to demonstrate the capabilities of the Trust platform for advanced marketing activities through correlating anonymized banking and telecommunications data. By validating how data for targeting profitable customers at a local level can be provided through correlating data by applying big data analytic techniques. This use case brings together a telecom and content provider, Nova, with the POS bank to test services that lead to better products targeting real client needs, as well as to increase their digital transformation and respective entrepreneurship activities as pioneers in the Greek telecom and banking sectors. The third use case of the Trust project is the improved customer support services by data acquisition. The vision of this use case is an out-of-the-box analytics solutions for the anonymized and visualization of big financial data. The focus is on ways of human-computer interaction still in the development stage. For example, chatbots that can act as automated assistants to increase their digital transformation and respective entrepreneurship activities. This use case concept is to assert that both the chatbot service and the next best action service can successfully run and be sold on the Trust platform to the interested users. The 3 use cases, along with the relevant services, is a way to validate the functionalities offered by the Trust platform. Now on, I'll give the mic to Ioannis Markopoulos on behalf of Nova to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yana. Good afternoon. So in the rest of the presentation, we will see what we have done so far in abstract terms, of course, and how we can engage you in this journey. So could you go on, please? So we plan, and we have already deployed to test various versions of the platform, depending on the maturity. The initial version was aimed to prove the architecture that we have defined, and mainly to integrate the existing components and see that we can implement and fulfill basic processes. The first cycle of trials completed last year and gave us a valuable input in order to progress in more mature developments. And currently we have the second version, the intermediate version, that we're testing with augmenting functionality, such as smart contracts and so on and so forth. What we want to see now is how we can turn this intermediate platform towards a fully operational platform that will aim at delivering at the end of the project. And we are moving to this era as well. Not only an operational, but also federated as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. In order to test and validate the platform, we have defined a holistic quality framework on which we base the full set of tests and trials that we have defined. we have run a very consistent process, very coherent process to acquire requirements, but also to assess what technologically and business-wise is available in the market so far, do's and don'ts, and what has succeeded and what probably has not been succeeded. Also, we try to catch up with beyond the state-of-the-art technologies in order to provide a future-proof platform. All this led to the testing and validating of a contemporary platform with respect to data exchange and data trading. And of course, conformity and standards compliance is part of our endeavor. Next slide, please. Thank you. The goals for the validation is to test, first of all, the fundamental business hypothesis for the data market trading, the data market deployment, and the data market federation. This is our vision, and this is what we aim at sustaining through our concrete developments. We try to test the various business aspects and processes through real use cases with real users from the industrial plane in various sectors, so as to understand how much of the business of the users can be transferred and they can be fulfilled through such a coherent marketplace proposition. We allow data sets, we allow applications, and we allow processes to be deployed and in various stages and test them thoroughly through numerous trials with real stakeholders. So we collect all this feedback through a consistent lesson learned process and give it back to our colleagues, discuss it with our colleagues on the development side in order to improve our proposition for the market. Thank you. Next slide, please. So just to give you some indication on the more mature trials that we are currently deployed, is we would like to test the scalability of our proposed platform, the security and compliance assessment, security and integration and integrity in the data market domains are very, very important for the sustainability of the business. So we need to have a holistic point of view and holistic assess of this facet. Beyond the usability from the user's point of view, from the end user or the business user point of view, we have to see how we aim at operating the marketplace. So quite equally important is the administration and operation point of view that safeguards the quality and uninterrupted operation of the marketplace. Federation is a key issue. Federation is not only a technological issue, but it's also a business issue. Via federation, we aim at expanding our reach in the ecosystem through peer-to-peer correlation with other entities, other data marketplaces, data spaces, and similar services. In this way, in a trusted manner, in a business profitable manner, we aim at quote-unquote exchanging clienteles and provide consistent and quality services, of course, under the GDPR compliance framework to a wider audience than the one that we can solely address. So we try to assess these capabilities with the extended access scenarios, with quality evaluation, securities, and open, I would say, calls to external stakeholders from the project in order to give us their valuable impact. Next slide, please. And before closing, I would like to brief you on the envisaged business model that we have. This business model is supported by our platform, especially the base business model, but we have a vision for moving towards higher level and more targeted business model in order to serve niche segments as well beyond the broad segment of the industrial community and individuals. So the base trust service in the base business model incorporates of course the subscription, various types of subscription depending on the profile of the subscriber, and of course we will find ways to attract key partners that can be enablers for augmenting our ecosystem. We will have a coherent and fully described asset catalog with the possibility for personalized search and recommendations. Of course, you understand it's not really a retail service. It's a service that targets professionals, either individual or companies, but yet recommendations and on targeted search is very useful when one has a voluminous number of asset categories and data as well. We would allow interaction with our users for them to assess and rate the transactions, the assets they use, in order to move towards a higher quality environment, high quality product. All of us and our clientele will become an ecosystem in the data trading community. Our assets will be supported by smart contracting in order to safeguard IPR, but also respect specific contractual terms. Federation, as we said before, with external marketplaces and entities is a key issue, and all of these federated assets will be presented in one single catalog, a unified catalog to our users. Of course, the provenance of each asset will be visible, and the terms of conditions of using this asset will be comprehensive. We will have, of course, transaction encryption, IPR management, and compliance to the highest standards. Usability is one key issue. Of course, we understand that not only data sets, but applications will be used as well and traded within our service. And applications may require technical support, but acquiring, viewing, simulating, or interacting with our assets, it should be seamless through a contemporary user interface that a normal analyst can use and have a concrete view on what is happening in this ecosystem. And of course, we would like to incorporate in our solution basic applications that enable transaction between entities that would like to exchange data, so they exchange information in an encrypted way, such as PSI solutions, homomorphic encryption, and so on and so forth. So we try via this to accommodate both trading data, but also exchanging information in a secure manner. All this basic trust model will be accompanied by value-add services such as consulting services, HR services, and bundling services with key entities in the data space domain, and in order to give a holistic view on our user, and of course assist our users incorporate our nodes into their own technical ecosystem. Later on, we envisage that we will create, using the existing infrastructure, niche marketplaces to address individual needs of industries, associations, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So I think that's the end of my presentation. In the next slide, you will see a link. In this link, you will have the ability to contact us we would like to extend our invitation to you in order to participate in our trials, see our data marketplace, evaluate it, and give us your opinion on how we can improve it and how we can integrate your business and benefit your business through our proposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jana and Yanis, for this very informative and rich presentation, focusing on the business angles of our use cases. Now, I would like to welcome our next speaker, who is Andreas, namely our tech expert when it comes to data privacy and security. So Andreas will elaborate and showcase today how emerging technologies enable trustworthy data sharing. As Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can already see my screen.
Yes, it's perfect.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alexandra. Warm welcome to everyone from Austria. As you've heard, I'm talking a bit more about technical solutions now in my contribution, especially how new cryptography approaches enable trustworthy data sharing. And if we think about encryption and data sharing, this sounds a bit awkward actually, because if you encrypt something, you typically don't want to share it. So at least it was this way in the past. So you have some kind of data and you encrypt it, then you can maybe store it somewhere safe on your hard drive, or you can transport it from A to B, and that's it. And if you want to do anything with this data, if you want to evaluate it, if you want to feed it into a machine learning model or whatsoever, you obviously always first need to encrypt this data. This means that this part of this example, who is taking care of the evaluation of your data, also needs to have the key to encrypt your data. And this means either it's yourself or you have to fully trust this other person with your encrypted data. And so this is a very kind of black and white scenario. And luckily, cryptography, there were a lot of progresses that are more, open up much more possibilities to a more shaded or gray way of thinking about that. So, for example, there might be scenarios where you don't fully trust the other party, but still want to evaluate something. So, for example, there's one company who has some data and another one who has a machine learning model, and you want to evaluate your data actually with this other company, but you don't want that this other company learns everything about your data. Or there could be like a group of different parties or different companies. All of them have their own data, their own private data, and they want to compute something all together. But again, they don't want to share the actual data content. And for one example would be, again, a machine learning model where all of them could profit from. But if there's like a central unit where this machine learning model is running and all the parties involved are sending their data there, this means that they fully have to trust this third party, so to say. And luckily, in modern cryptography, there are a couple of techniques that allow to do this kind of secure collaborations without having the need to trust the other party. And you've heard in Yannis' talk, you already heard some of the terms and some of the phrases. For example, homomorphic encryption is one of these modern technologies that I very briefly wanted to introduce to you, or secure multi-party computation is another one. And let me start with homomorphic encryption. I won't go into the details, just want to show you how it works in principle and what kind of opportunities you have with these new technologies. For homomorphic encryption, so as I said, typically in cryptography, you have some kind of data, you encrypt it, and then you get this kind of gibberish expressions out of it, and that's it. And you need to decrypt it if you want to do something. But homomorphic encryption is a way you can actually do calculations with the encrypted data. So with this as I call it, gibberish expressions. You can, for example, sum them up or do some multiplications or whatever, and really calculate something, and the result will again still be some encrypted value. And you can send this back to the data owner, and only he or she is having the key to unlock the result. So this homomorphic encryption is a way of basically, if you want to outsource your computation, for example, you have again someone who is having a machine learning model or some kind of other analytics model that you want to use. With homomorphic encryption, you can do this in a secure way without having to share your data with this other party. And again, the crucial point is here that you can do the calculation without having to decrypt the data first. So you can really do calculations with the encrypted parts of the message. And here is a very simple example where I just sum up two numbers, but in principle, this also works for more complex evaluations where you can train a machine learning model or something else. And another technique that I also very briefly want to introduce is private set intersection. If you already heard the keyword again in Yanni's talk, because this is also one of the methods that we are using in trusts. And imagine we have two companies and both of them have data sets, and it doesn't really matter what kind of data this is, just two databases, so to say. And these two companies want to know which entries in their database is similar, is identical. So company A has some data, company B has some data, and for example, these parts here now that are marked in yellow are identical. And private set intersection is a cryptographic protocol that allows you to find out these identical values in these two databases without having to share the database, or without that company A learns anything from the data of company B except these similar entries. And how is it working? Again, you have these two data sets here, and you encrypt this data with your private key. So company A has a private encryption key, and company B has a private encryption key. And they encrypt this data, and then they exchange the encrypted data sets. So company A is getting the one from company B, and vice versa. And then they encrypt this encrypted data set again. So you have a kind of a double encryption. And maybe you can already see where this is going to. You exploit here that you have a doubled encrypted value, and it doesn't matter which key you're using first, the result is the same. So then you can compare these two parts again, and you have two double encrypted data sets, and you can see that the values who are identical appear again as identical values also in the double encrypted data sets. And again, the important point is here, you only can identify these parts who are really identical, and you don't learn anything else about the other entries in this database or in this data set. And what are the challenges to overcome here? Where are the problems with these methods, and where are the advantages maybe also? One of the big issues in general are these performance bottlenecks. So the more security, the more privacy you bring into your evaluation, usually the slower the evaluation gets. So you have to give up some of the performance typically if you want to do it in a secure encrypted way. And one thing is that these algorithms are also still under development. So there are no off-the-shelf solutions, so to say, and they are still quite research heavy. But again, they open up very new ways in the way how we treat data, how we share data, and especially how we collaborate over data. And as another challenge that we are also addressing within TRUSTS is especially the legal framework within the European Union. So there is the GDPR and the Data Governance Act and some other legal framework where all the methods that we are using have to comply, of course, and it's also not that clear at the moment how modern cryptography is related to GDPR, for example. This is ongoing research and ongoing discussions, and that's why I'm also very happy within TRUSTS that we have the collaboration with our colleagues from KU Leuven and the legal experts here. And so what are our concrete contributions in Trust? What do we do with these methods that I just introduced to you? The first thing that we did was an efficient prototype for really encrypted machine learning, where you basically can have a complex algorithm and encrypt all of it or parts of it and do your evaluation with that. And this is working very quickly. So we were able to get rid of these typical performance issues that you have with these approaches. We also developed an industry-ready solution for this private set intersection. Here we also used synergies with another Horizon project with SafeDeed, basically, where the first prototype was developed, and together with within TRUSTS, we created a new library, a new version that is now really working for large use cases with lots of data, and we moved from a prototype to a really industry-ready solution for these kind of approaches. And especially also, as I mentioned, this interface between legal aspects and the technical perspectives on this privacy preserving analytics. It's also something that we focused on within Trust. We also have joint publications here where we address the topics from both directions and from both sides. And what we're doing at the moment is also we are including this kind of encryption and security and privacy methods to other machine learning approaches. This is work in progress, basically. In this lower on the lower right-hand side in this figure, you see currently we are involved with encrypted federated learning. So where you have a scenario with lots of clients that are involved and that also do some kind of machine learning. And at the moment, we're working on prototypes to encrypt this communication here. And as a last comment also, that I mentioned this relation of our technical solutions to the GDPR. Here, one of our PhD students, Lukas Helminger, also just very recently published a paper where he developed basically an assessment of one of our techniques, one of our solutions of multi-party computation, and how does it relate to GDPR. And with this assessment that he developed, you basically can see what advantages from a legal perspective do you get if you use multi-party computation or not. And so what is coming next? We are working on upscaling our solutions and also further improving the performance. We are working on more complex scenarios. So this homomorphic encryption, where you basically outsource your computation in a secure way. This gets a bit more complicated when there are more parties involved, not just one, but a couple of parties, for example. And there are also solutions that we are working on at the moment. I already mentioned this encrypted federated scenarios, and in general, a transformation of algorithms to more privacy preserving and secure versions of them. And especially also this legal assessment of our cryptographic solutions is going on, and it's carried out by our colleagues from KU Leuven. And with that, I'm already at the end. Thank you very much. And I think I can hand over to Lorenzo now, right?
Thank you very much, Andreas, for this very insightful presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to our legal and ethics expert, Lorenzo. So Lorenzo will showcase today how we can implement data valorization under solid legal and ethical principles. Looks perfect, Lorenzo. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandra. Can you see my screen? Perfect. Can you see the presentation? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thank you everyone for listening in today. You've really listened to the presentation from my colleagues where several times the legal intricacies and sometimes challenges and difficulties linked to the federation of markets and to the data exchange and data trade have been highlighted or hinted at, and that just demonstrates how big of an impact the legal framework does have on the endeavor of advancing the state of data exchange initiatives and ultimately achieving the objectives of the European Commission's strategy on data. What I will present to you today is, while at the same parallel to showing you what we've been doing from a legal perspective in the TRUSTS project. I'll be focusing on a few of what I believe are the main points that we have been addressing and we will still address for the remainder of the project, and in close collaboration with our technical partners and colleagues. So why data valorization under legal principle and ethical principles? Because the concept of data can be looked at from several perspectives, and in order to extract value from data, we look from the economic perspective at the concept of data. At the same time, though, data is an asset or is reality that has a value that goes beyond the economic value for data holders, data subjects, in case of personal data. So the community that the European Union has tried to put a framework to that, and the objective here is to make sure that an endeavor such as trusts or similar ones do not enable economic valorization of data at the expense of the other interests protected, but to do that at the same time as protecting those values. So that's why I think it's important to explore the relationship between the sometimes tension as well between the objective of preserving let's say the more conservative side of value of data and the economic side of data. So what I will do in this presentation is basically well, divides into three main streams. We first recall why the legal and ethical framework is important to our analysis, what were the main achievements so far, and I will focus on a few, let's say I'll bring to the spotlight a few areas in the legal domain that I believe merits some discussion, and then a little bit of focus on the ongoing future activities that separate us from the end of the project. So why is legal framework important? Also the ethical framework. I would like to talk about this, going back to the concept of trust, that also resonates in the title of the project. So when we talk about data, and especially data sharing and data exchange, and in the let's say evolution of that concept, data trade, we are looking at the interaction between several types of subjects of actors. So we have data subjects, which are natural persons who have personal data. Then we have companies, economic actors, as we also have in our projects, who of course are trying to well, gain, of course, some profit from data exchange at the same time as offering services to businesses and other companies. Then we have research institutions who gain value from the data in order to advance state of research and contribute to societal progress. And finally, governments that are supposed to be acting in the public interest. So all these actors do have a stake in sharing data and exchanging data with each other. Now, to do so, they need trust, and the achievement of trust is not trivial. That's also what was highlighted by my colleagues before. It's one of the major challenges in enabling data exchange is enabling trust. If we have trust, we have all these interactions we see on the right-hand side of the slide, and then that can lead to data valorization. Without that, it gets very difficult, and hindrances to trusts are hindrances, sorry, to getting values from the data. So what is trust actually, and how does that let's say resonate in the in our project? So we can think of trust as a relationship between agents or actors, where in a two-way relationship, one entity or actor or agent is willing to accept and depend on another one and on his or her behavior in order to fulfill his expectations. So it's in our real world, let's say outside of the realm of data, trust is something that has to do with personal relationship and personal, acceptance to put part of one's expectations into the hands of someone else. It's a big thing, and as you can see, as you can think of, it's by no means trivial to achieve that in a business context, and not because businesses or governments or research or data subjects are inherently alien to trust in that context, just because when it comes to organizations and to the way society is organized, it's a whole different matter to put or place trust into someone else. So, and this is all the more complicated by the fact that the concept of trust here needs to be understood within a digital context, so which is of course immaterial in a way. And looking at this definition below, you can see the difference is that physical contacts are not longer there. More social pressures can be different perceived by the actors, and so digital becomes a mediator between these actors and needs to convey trust in a new way. So all these call for strategies to achieve trust, right? So in the previous presentations, we focused on a few ways through which trust can, let's say, through a few ways can contribute to achieving trust. And I believe trust is an ideal that is not going to be achieved 100% at a certain point in time. It's an incremental process, it's an incremental concept. And this is where legal framework comes in, because there is a set of technological solutions to achieving trust, meaning the barrier to trusting another party in the concept and in the context of digital marketplace can be achieved through making technology available that, because of the way it's constructed and because of the services it offers, because of the security it provides, can make these actors overcome the fear of accepting to place trust into these parties. And that's what my colleagues have explained as well. Also, trust, a vehicle to achieving trust is communication and information. So especially when it comes to involving data subjects, who are always the most vulnerable parties taking part in these exchanges. So ensuring to that they know the way that the data are processed, and ensuring fair and transparent process operations and involvement of these parties. And that has a lot to do with the ethical principles applying to this project. And then connected to this is legal ethical framework. So the EU has equipped itself with a framework of legal principles, rules, actionable rights and obligations that is attempting to increase the amount of trust that data exchange initiatives can give. But as my colleagues explained, this is by no means well established, because the legal framework is just one side to it, just one vehicle to achieving trust, and it's always in motion, as we will see. So through which means can legal framework contribute to achieving trust? Like, we can see a few examples in the bubble here. So we have some disciplines and some sets of rules and some mechanisms that can, let's say, little by little increase the willingness of actors to place trust in parties they interact with. So we have guidelines, we have the rights granted by EU law, we have contract law provisions, we have enforcement mechanisms, and we have in italic, because it's still yet to come, the proposal to have neutrality in alleged intermediaries in platforms, enabling these exchanges of data. So all these initiatives lay down legal rules are conducive to trust, but as we see in the middle box, they do let's say, stumble upon a few challenges. One of these is the suboptimal trust in compliance, meaning that, yes, the legal framework does increase trust to the extent that the parties can trust each other that they will both comply with the law, but sometimes this trust in compliance is not optimal, which is hindrance to achieving full trust for data exchange. At the same time, legal uncertainty. So the fact that either because the law is still in motion or because when the law is settled, there is still lack of awareness, actors are not fully aware or do not fully understand or grasp what they need to do, what they have to do under the law, and what they can expect the other parties to do. So all these call for, on the one side, continuous improvement of the legal framework to make it more clear, to make it more settled than it is in motion. And as I said before, parallel approaches to increasing trust. So technology and communication and legal and ethics at the same time. So no approach, no vehicle is sufficient to achieving trust. So this is connected to what we're doing as a an active work package in the Trust project. So these are the four main objectives and streams that we are working on. So our work is orientated towards, on the one hand, bringing as much clarity as possible to technical partners when it comes to understanding the applicable legal framework, which is sometimes a daunting task because, as I said, the law is by no means not settled, and as we'll see in a moment, it is even less so in the realm of data. And at the same time, research on the upcoming and or proposed changes to the law and how they can potentially impact the project. And in parallel to all this, validate and providing legal oversight to the technical components of the project. So in terms of achievements, and this will provide me the opportunity to focus just a little bit on a few issues. We can see that the first two objectives of our package have been achieved. Third one is ongoing, and here we have the, let's say, list of legal domains or areas we are focusing on. As you can see, and this is by no means exhaustive. You just list the main areas, and you can see already that there is a huge variety of legal frameworks applicable to the very concept of trusts as a data marketplace. Of course, the most important, prominent, and overarching and omnipresent, I would say, area is privacy data protection. So here we are confronted with making sure technologies and processes and workflows envisaged under trusts are compliant with the GDPR principal rights and obligations. And so we're confronted with issues regarding the allocation of roles and responsibilities to the actors within data flows, confronted also with the uncertainty surrounding what is personal data and what is non-personal data in practice, especially when it comes to data anonymization and de-anonymization techniques, and to how far can we go into sharing data with not absolute anonymization to still extract some values from the analytics can be applicable to the data. So all these aspects are examples of why of a legal framework that is partially there, but still to be developed as the business evolves as well. So in parallel to the business. Also, and that's very important for the concept of the marketplace, and linking back to what Mark said also at the beginning of his presentation, regulation data is economic asset. So, and to the concept of trading data. It's a very important question because as the state of the law stands in the EU, the concept of data is not yet officially attached to any notion of trade, apart from, of course, very peculiar examples of, for example, data that is IP protected, because that in that case, there is a legal framework that is different that applies, so copyright or patent law and so on. But when it comes to data that is personal or can be generic non-personal data, the concept of data trading, it's something that the EU law might go towards, but still hasn't, let's say, endorsed fully in its legal framework so far. So that's something that also is linked to the content of the new or upcoming legislations on data. And as well, the idea of data sovereignty and the future of comprehensive legal framework on data as such. Then, of course, we have obligations for actors such as online platform intermediaries that are subject to specific regulation when it comes to, we could say, the ethical side of the endeavors, which is ensuring fairness and transparency in the enabling interaction between businesses, so B2B, and also between customers and businesses. So depending on the processes enabled in trusts, this regulation can impose certain obligations to the platform itself, also in terms of liability of intermediaries and exemptions to that. So that's basically, we could say, one of the manifestations of ethical principles into binding legal norms. And then we have what regulates basically the transactions of data between businesses. Coming back to the second building block on regulation of data as an economic asset. Also here, not only is the EU law framework not fully up to speed with this concept, but also there's a lot of fragmentation when it comes to the contractual requirements for B2B data transactions. So national laws still regulate several aspects of this, which doesn't really have compliance. And also when it comes to what's considered to be unfair practices or practices that are within the limits of legality. So you can see that there are two tensions to achieving a fully EU-based let's say, framework for data exchanges in an economic understanding. Then there's also the competition law aspect, and then the use of data as a resource that can be subject to analysis and scrutiny to achieve competitive and to maintain competitive markets. Data is, well, it's regarded as sometimes as also a commodity, so as an asset that if subject to agreements that could be anti-competitive, or if manipulated by entities that have too much market power, could be subject also to scrutiny by Commission and the competition law framework. So any agreements that exchange data is in principle, of course, interested by this framework. Linking back to the use cases that were presented briefly a few minutes ago, there's also the interplay with sector-specific legislation, for example, on anti-money laundering, and the sometimes difficult interplay that this legislation has with the GDPR and privacy, because they, of course, both trying to achieve somewhat different objectives, and there's sometimes philosophical even tension between the two, and how this can be solved in practice, because that has an impact on the availability of the technical solutions put in place to enable the use case. And finally, as was also into that, some legal aspects of smart contracts and blockchain, because yeah, those are tools that would be enabling a lot of transactions taking place on the Trust platform. So I just gave a little bit of an overview of the main legal issues that we are confronted with, and we have already provided some guidance on, but still ongoing. When it comes to what's next, so all this overview that I just presented you is linked to regulation that isn't yet in place, meaning that some of the legal rules that regulate these aspects are in force, but many of them are not. So in this context, as you can see here, we will closely monitor the development of proposed legislation on data, which is very comprehensive, but at the same time, presents some challenges, and assess the potential impact of this legislation on the implementation of the project. This slide still reminds of the variety and variability of legal frameworks applicable to the various use cases. As you can see, well, the anti-money laundering legislation I was referring to specifically concerns use case 1, but there are, as you can see, other frameworks applying to other use cases. As you can see, what's horizontal across the 3 is compliance with data protection and data privacy law, because that's of course paramount importance whenever data personal are involved. And as you can see here, mainly on the right hand side of the slide, we have a lot of acts that are still not in force, and that can have a bearing on the compliance strategies of the platform. And in particular, I'm looking at the Data Services Act and Data Governance Act that was also mentioned briefly a few minutes ago. These acts are, depending on whether or not the trust platform in specific cases can fall within the scope of applications of these acts, they can bring about a whole new set of obligations for the management of the platform itself. And maybe we also have some time to discuss in the Q&A potentially, but there are some issues that, if not clarified, could give rise to some tension between the Governance Act, for example, and its ideals, and the ideals and objectives of the GDPR, and which is potentially putting at risk platforms that want, of course, to be complying with both and want at the same time protect data, but at the same time to enable sharing of the data. So this is one of the fundamental tensions really in the legal framework, and is the fact that it's not yet resolved just testifies of the importance of having a continuous approach that brings all these issues together and doesn't over specialize into looking at just one of the issues without forgetting the potential follow-up effects on the other aspects involved, because it's all part of one legal framework that intends to be coherent internally and driving of the data protection and also economic value of the data, but as things stand, it's still struggling to do so. So our main focus would be to bring as much clarity as we can from the available rules to the partners when it comes to these issues. So that's that marks the end of my presentation. And of course, we can delve into any more topic more in detail to the extent that the audience intends to. Thank you for listening to this so far.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo, for this wonderful presentation. We will share a bit now our social media connections. Perfect. Thank you very much, Michael and Thomas. So please make sure to check our website and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, because as we are in the final year of our project, more events will take place and we will be sharing more interesting insights, developments, and lessons learned of our project. So now let's start with our Q&A session. And we actually do have some questions that I would like to share and direct to our panelists today. So let's start. The first question is for our colleague, Mark. So Mark, the question is, you've done research on platforms and business models in other sectors. Why can't we simply transfer these insights to data marketplaces? Mark, we cannot hear you.
I was saying that's a nice question to start with, a big question. So indeed,
Great.
I've studied platforms in all kinds of markets. Data platforms are different. If we think about, for instance, smartphone platforms, where most of the platform studies come from, or gaming platforms, it's pretty clear what industry it is. It's sort of confined, focused. Data marketplace potentially cut into every industry sector. So that means that their broadness is much greater than those existing platforms. And I think that also explains in part the fragmentation that we see of the current data markets. And the second thing is that the characteristics of data are quite different from, for instance, software and apps in the other platform markets. Data can be edited, can be put out of context, new context can be inserted into data, it can be traded and duplicated for free. So managing data and access to data and governing the data is much more challenging than when you think about apps on software platforms. But who knows who's going to get access to those data? It could be your competitor on a different platform. So simply opening up everything, that's nice to have one single market, but it's also pretty risky. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Mark. And indeed, we see in practice that there are many various diverging legal frameworks. And for example, in Europe, we have GDPR and many national as well as European regulations and rules. That's the next question will be along these lines, and it will be for our technical expert of privacy, Andreas. So Andreas, the question is, compared to other continents, in the European Union seems to be a stronghold when it comes to privacy. So the question can be a bit provocative, but in your opinion, on the long run, will the European industry have a disadvantage because of that or not?
Yeah, also a very interesting question. And also not that easy to answer, of course, because it's the influence here is a bit hard to estimate. But what definitely is true is that with these privacy techniques that we are having at our hands, it's possible to do things, to do collaborations that you won't do otherwise. So, for example, you have competitors who can work together and cooperate on something that they would never do because they are risking to give up their existence, basically, when their company secrets are revealed. And these new techniques that we have available in cryptography, for example, they allow us to do these kind of collaborations, and that's definitely one of the advantages that come with privacy, so to say. And so I would say in Europe we won't have a disadvantage. Maybe it takes a bit longer to implement these kind of things and to see the benefits, but there are definitely benefits. And I mean, besides all the discussion on legal and ethical aspects, because privacy, of course, at the end of the day is also a human right. But I think it's definitely not a mistake to bet on the privacy horses within the European Union. And again, there are ways, or you can do things with these new techniques that you won't do otherwise, and you have new kinds of business models, you have new ways to collaborate, you have new ways of creating benefits for your companies and for your customers that are not possible without these techniques. That would be my answer to this question, but again, of course, it's a very complex issue.
Indeed, it is, Andreas, and we need more resources to further work on that and develop more solutions and extend our current work. And of course, privacy has besides the technical component, is very strongly interrelated with the legal and ethical frameworks and regulations. So our next question is for Lorenzo. And namely, the question is, could you further elaborate on how you will integrate the current European legislative proposals into the assessment?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really crucial one because, as I said, the legal framework is in motion. So we have a few, well, more than a few legal rules in force, but and on the privacy side, actually, the legal framework is mostly well established. But then, what's upcoming and what's being proposed is basically the EU response, I would say, legal response to what's being referred to as the commodification of data potentially. So the EU is right now with these proposals on the governance data services, data act potentially next year, is trying to give a response to, okay, let's regulate as well the need that industry and society is showing for data exchange and data trading. So it's not a phenomenon that we can no longer just leave to the individual initiative. We need to have a legal framework for this. And how we will do that, how we will make sure to integrate this perspective into the project. Well, we are closely following the developments in terms of negotiations and discussions on these three and more proposals. In parallel to this, because text may change, in correspondence with the sessions and of negotiation that in the institutions, we are researching on the fundamental issues surrounding these acts, and especially how they interrelate with the most well-established framework, which is the data protection framework in the EU on data. So these questions, regardless of the nature and of the phrasing of the text of these the upcoming legal acts, are there. They need to be investigated, and so we are combining this fundamental research process with a more, I would say, even week-to-week monitoring of the status of negotiations, and then raising awareness of the developments and integrating the developments in the research work.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Indeed, this is a constant effort because we have to adapt to new challenges and developments. So it's ongoing work. And thank you for providing insights on that. We do have some other legal questions as well that we will address later on. However, I would like now a bit to diversify and balance our discussion. Thus, we will have a discussion more about our use cases, and we have our two experts here, Jana and Yanis, who are on the field of the use cases working there. So would you like to share, for example, what is the expected outcome of the trials in TRUSTS, and what exactly do you aim to evaluate?
Yes, hi, Alexandra. Let me say first that when you're developing a product, before taking it out to the world, you need to test it first. You need to evaluate it first. So in TRUSTS, this is basically the trials and our use cases designed for, and they aim to test and evaluate, first of all, the TRUSTS platform as an operational data exchange marketplace. And the three use cases, along with their relevant services and applications, it's a way to validate the functionalities offered by the TRUSTS platform. So based on these processes defined, we test their user friendliness, completeness, business effectiveness, for an overall assessment of the platform. Well, the outcome will be mainly feedback to the project, to the development team, perhaps for further enhancement or a valuable tool to make sure that we are, on the right path towards our goal into this project. I can see more. Our use cases are, throughout the trials, we are performing, let's say, application onboarding, company subscription, we do several trials, several steps that we follow in terms of evaluating the functionalities that we are offering in our platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana. Maybe a next question also that is the use case trial related can be, is the TRUSTS platform designed to serve only use cases?
Well, I'll say no, it's not. Within TRUSTS, we define these 3 use cases to validate, as I said, the functionalities of the platform. But are you suggesting in real life? Again, I will say no, because the TRUSTS platform can serve any interested party, any professional that is interested into a data exchange marketplace that trades, buys or sells data or relevant applications. So normally the platform can host and serve more services and more applications outside our 3 defined TRUSTS use cases.
Thank you very much, Jana.
Thank you.
So we all know that currently the data marketplace is fragmented. So we wonder if this is something that will be resolved after some time, or if there will be a winner that takes all in the end, or to phrase it in another way, how many different data marketplaces, platforms do we need and why? Mark, would you like to address that question?
Yeah, sure. I'm also interested to hear what the others have to say about this from the business side. But yeah, so this is typically true that there is 1 or 2 or maybe 3 parties that win the market in platform businesses because of network effects. So platforms become more useful if there are more parties on there. So that's why the bigger get bigger. And that is what we see Airbnb and Uber, and Android and Apple in other markets. Game consoles, the same. It's very difficult to start a new one right now. I think a main thing, though, is specialization. So the need for specialization. So in markets where users have a need to have very specific platform services, there is some potential to have a fragmented landscape also in the future. So if we all want very similar things as users, then yeah, then you could say it will converge to a situation where there will be a few that dominate. And then this, what we see now with the fragmentation, is just a very early stage. But perhaps this will sustain because data marketplaces are in different industries and in different markets, different types of data. Businesses have different needs for privacy. It's not all the same. So perhaps this need for specialization will sustain in the long run as well. So yeah, that's one of the most interesting questions, I think, what we are seeing. What are we seeing now? Are we the early ones? Are we studying it too early, perhaps even? And the businesses that we're launching, perhaps they won't make it in the end because they're too early. Or will this indeed be the situation as it is? Yeah, lots of choice, differences.
So it is. I would be very keen also to hear from Yanis a bit on the commercialization side of the TRUSTS platform now that we're having this business uptake discussion. And maybe Yanis, you can also feel free to answer the same questions as Mark. It would be very nice to have your viewpoints on the development, or what's, in your opinion, how do you see the future actually in Europe when it comes to data markets? And to phrase it a bit more concretely, so how would you envision commercialization, and at which stage can someone use the TRUSTS platform before commercialization?
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And I will try to capitalize and take upon what Mark said before. I will start from this. I think we should not confuse the data markets with the commodities markets and the retail markets such as eBay, Amazon, and so on and so forth. I don't say they are very successful business, but data is far. Mark said before, it's totally different. Have a different life cycle, has different means of usage as a whole or as a part, and various other attributes. So we have to see the value of trading data with respect to the specific context of using this data. So this, I think, defines what a data market is versus another retail commodity market. So thinking of who may dominate, or if anyone can dominate the market and the rest will be minimal or obsolete. We have cloud providers, many cloud providers, Azure, AWS, and Google, and many more at a global or local level. They all provide services and frameworks. Nevertheless, we have seen initiatives such as YOS Gaia-X that provide frameworks in order to give common means to interested parties and ensure interoperability, compliance, security. So what we envisage for the future, and it's also been implied by Mark as well, is that data markets will target interested communities, communities with common interests such as automotive, tourism, energy consumption, environment, so on and so forth. So they will all collectively constitute their data spaces and try to trade and exchange application data and other assets. And yet these data spaces should not be on their own, should not stand on their own. They will have the need to interoperate. They have the need to federate. For instance, this is our terminology. The tourism market may have the need of environmental data and so on and so forth in order to progress. So what I envisage for this space is that large communities will constitute data markets, vertical data markets, but in a way that they will be able to interoperate. And this will be a dynamic environment, not a static one. Should an emerging need we have an emerging need, a specific data space will involve with all the interested parties. Coming to the commercialization vision of our solution, we would like to play a key role in this ecosystem. We would like to offer cross-the-board solutions, horizontal solutions, accommodated various data spaces, various data sets, and various data assets from various domains. We use our use cases as key pioneers to attract interested parties. We would like our use case partners, especially the industrial partners, to be our visionaries and incorporate our services within their own infrastructure and use our valuable services. Also convey the message to their own ecosystem. We envisage that this ecosystem that we are building through our platform will have a significant amount of users and a significant amount of sustainable subscribers around us, and all of it will be a valuable asset for an external marketplace to seek federation with us and us seek federation with them in order to find a way to exchange data sets in various areas, in various domains, and create a bigger ecosystem and be a significant part of this ecosystem. This is our commercialization vision. We think that our platform and solution is quite robust towards this direction, offering compliance services to our clientele, but also to external marketplaces and data spaces that would like to federate with us. And last but not least, since we are approaching towards the end of our project, we are approaching towards the end of our solution. I think that even now, colleagues that participate in this webinar and other in their environment as well could access us through our site and request access and usage of our data marketplace. On the timing side, our current solution seems to be quite robust. Yet in the beginning of summer, June, July, we will have a near final solution. So we think that all the colleagues, even at this stage, will be invited to participate and perform their own trials, their own usage, and give us their own feedback, discuss their needs, and see how we can assist their business vision and business needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yanis. Very helpful and insightful. Let's switch up a bit our questions because we want to address many items ranging from business to legal and ethics to technology. And now I see a question that is very good for Andreas. I assume this question comes because we use very high-level innovative terminology when it comes to the solutions that we are developing. So the question for you, Andreas, would be, what is the difference between federated learning and multi-party computation? Are these methods related?
Thanks very much. They are not directly related, at least. So the idea for federated learning is that you actually bring the algorithm to your data and not vice versa. So you have an algorithm somewhere on the cloud, on a server, wherever, and you have clients who want to participate in some kind of computation, and all of them have data. And the idea of federated learning or these federated approaches is that you, in the first step, download your algorithms from the server to your local device, be it your mobile phone or your laptop or your PC in your company, whatsoever. And then you do a training or evaluation step with this model locally on your device, and then you send back the results to this cloud server, the central unit, so to say. And there all these model updates are aggregated and put together, and then you get a perfectly trained machine learning model, for example, on this cloud without ever having to actually transmit the data to this central unit. That's the basic idea of federated learning or of these federated systems. Multi-party computation is also a way of computing something with multiple parties, but the principle is different. For multi-party computation, so the first thing is you don't have this kind of a central unit where you communicate, you just communicate among all the parties. And at least the starting point is similar. So to say, you have a couple of companies, persons, parties, whatsoever. All of them have their data, and all of them want to compute something together. And with multi-party computation, you have secure protocols where, for example, you create something that's called secret shares. That's part of your data that is distributed among all these parties, and everyone is participating in the calculation a bit with these local shares that they got from everyone who is participating. And then they share these results, and there everything is put together. But again, there is no central unit, no central server as in federated learning. So that's one main difference. And also the security guarantees that you get. So from federated learning, we know, for example, that even though you just transmit the model updates and no actual data, you can still recover the data from these model updates, basically. So there are some attacks to recover the data. And for multi-party computation, these protocols make really sure that you cannot recover the individual data that is in this kind of calculation. And I mentioned in my presentation very briefly that we are merging encryption with federation at the moment, and this is exactly the point why we do this, because we want to make it more secure and in a way that you can recover the data anymore, even though you just share the aggregates. So this question already went a bit deeper into the technical details, but I hope I could clarify this a bit. So multi-party computation and federated learning is not the same, except the starting point, maybe that you have a couple of parties who want to compute something together.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Indeed, very insightful. And as you mentioned, attacks, for example, and we constantly realize the importance of security and privacy. The next question would be, how secure are these algorithms, especially when it comes to the usage of novel, powerful technologies like quantum computers? So can they be attacked by large enough quantum computer?
Mm-hmm. The short answer is no. These algorithms are also so-called quantum secure, if you want. So we know since the 80s that there are some ways, if you have a very large quantum computer, that you can attack classical cryptography, and things that we today regard as secure can be attacked with this algorithm given a large enough quantum computer. But I said we know this since the 80s, and I think not long after this was known, this was revealed in the 80s, in cryptography people started working on so-called post-quantum algorithms, so like new approaches in cryptography that also that are secure against a quantum computer, even though we don't have machines that are large enough today. So this might even take 10 or more years until we have quantum computers that become an actual threat for cryptography. But so already since a couple of years, people are working on new algorithms that like a completely new generation of cryptographic algorithms where no quantum attack is known. And there is also currently an international challenge of finding new standards for so-called post-quantum cryptography going on at NIST in the United States. And these algorithms that I briefly introduced in my presentation, homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation, these are already this kind of new generation of secure algorithms. So especially homomorphic encryption is post-quantum secure, so to say, because the problems that are buried underneath in the mathematical details of how this protocol is designed, this has nothing to do with the factorization of prime numbers or so. These are these kind of algorithms that can be attacked with a quantum computer, but this is like a completely new set of approach and new problems underneath that cannot be tackled by quantum compute until at least we don't know of any attack yet. So these algorithms can be regarded as long time secure and very I mean, you never have 100% security. This is always very I think no cryptographer would guarantee that, but these algorithms are the most secure that we have, so to say, and it's even secure against threats that we don't have at the moment yet. So even 10 years ahead, when there are maybe large quantum computers available, these methods are still secure.
Thank you very much, Andreas. That is very nice to hear. Sounds very promising. So let's maybe switch a bit our topic and maybe look into the future. And therefore, the next question would be for Lorenzo. And mainly, Lorenzo, could you please share, in your opinion, what are the most significant challenges you foresee coming from the evolving European legal framework?
Sure. Yeah, that's a crucial question as well, because I see several sets of challenges even before breaking each of them down. I think the main one, we have challenges at even a philosophical legal doctrine level between the interest of the legal framework in protecting the rights of data subjects, which are well established in EU law, and at the same time promoting the more and more sharing and getting value out of data in an economic way. So I think one of the first and most paramount challenges that I see coming is how to reconcile the limitations to and principles that promote limitation of sharing personal data based on the GDPR. For example, the data minimization principle, data purpose limitation principle as well, with the what can be assumed to be or expected to be a set of rules coming from Data Governance Act, potentially the Data Act itself, that is going to encourage more and more sharing of data because of the value that they inherently contain. So the legal framework needs to pay attention not to contradict itself, and even by not doing so, there can still be formal coherence, but then incoherence in principles and in intentions that can put actors and intermediaries such as trust at risk of non-compliance with either aspects of the law. Another main challenge comes from the fact that connected to this, right now there is no ownership concept attached to data by themselves, and the approach that the Digital Services Act and Data Governance Act seem to take seems to hint at the fact that EU legislation would like to adopt an ownership rights-based approach to data, meaning right now, even not even the subject has ownership on their data. Of course, the data belong to them in a way, but they just have rights over the data, not to, for example, grant access of anyone else to them and so on, but they don't own it in the same way as they would own their home or a car, for example. So instead, from certain definitions and provisions in data governance proposal, it seems that these provisions may work under an ownership rights-based approach that is still to be, however, introduced in EU law. And there's of course a debate of whether or not this is desirable for EU law to adopt such an approach. But even from a factual point of view and not a normative point of view, this is a process which is in motion, and that the Data Act proposal may shed some light on as soon as it's released. And that's one of the challenges, because it's difficult for an ecosystem such as trusts and the actors participating into it to get ready, because you don't really know what you're getting ready for. So that's I would say a second set of big challenges that we see ahead.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. And that's part maybe of the innovation process, that we are developing novel solutions and projects and components and theories, and we test them then in practice. So it's an ongoing circle and work. So we have reached the finalization of our webinar today. So I would like to thank our exceptional panelists for joining forces, and thank you for the wonderful and insightful presentations. I would also like to thank very much our attendees for participating and listening to our presentations today. We will also make sure to place the recording and make it available for you in case you would like to refer back to the keynotes and presentations today. Please make sure also to follow us on our social media and check out our website, because we'll be having more events and webinars and workshops coming up in the next months, and which could be helpful and insightful for you. So thank you very much. We stay in contact, and I wish you all a lovely day ahead. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.